Well, thank all of you for being here today. Obviously, since the end of the season a few weeks ago until now, our focus as a program has been on the future and moving forward. It was a very, very difficult season, and I think I've already talked about that at length. It's just how tough this season was for a number of reasons. Obviously, wins and losses. And we all understand the expectations of the program. I understand the expectations of the program, and we had a tough season from a wins and losses perspective. It's also a very difficult season with COVID and all of the things that we had to deal with, all the accommodations and challenges that going through a year like this presented for us. But this season, quite honestly, for me as the head coach and the leader of the program, it's like an open wound. And when you have an open wound, you put a bandage on it and you get busy trying to take care of what you need to take care of, which is recruiting, which is the incoming group that we have for next year. A lot of things to be excited about in the future of the program. And we got to let that wound heal. If we keep pulling on that bandage and tearing that bandage off and talking about what happened this year, we don't get busy doing what we need to be doing, which is trying to fix some of the issues and the problems that we dealt with this year. And that's my job. My job is to look at what do we need to do better, address it, make the adjustments, and move forward. And that's what we're doing. So, and we've got a lot to look forward to going into next year. We've got one of the best freshmen in the country in Caden Grice. And Caden Grice is one of the most dangerous hitters in the country. And we also have to make sure that we do everything we can to utilize him in both roles as a hitter, a middle of the order hitter, but also develop him as a starting pitcher. And that's going to be our main focus for Caden moving forward going into next year. We have an incredibly valuable piece in our program, and we need to utilize him to the best of our ability. We brought in a couple transfers in the recruiting process. We know that we're going to lose some experienced hitters to the draft that are really good. And we've got a couple young men coming into the program that we feel like can boost our offense. We have Blake Wright, Max Wagner, two guys that were freshmen this year that played a good bit for us. As I checked a couple of days ago, they're hitting 370 and 380 in wood bat leagues this summer. We feel like those two guys have tremendous makeup and also the ability to play at a high level. We return guys like Jonathan French, who's up in the Cape Cod League. Adam Hackenberg has caught a lot for us. We'll see what happens in the draft with Adam. There's a chance that he could be drafted. But if we get Adam Hackenberg back and Jonathan French will be a redshirt sophomore this year. Those two guys caught a lot for us and are very, very good. There's a chance we could lose James Parker to the draft, but there's also a chance that we could get him back. So we'll have to wait and see what our team looks like with some of these pieces, as we get into that July 10th or 11th date when the draft is. And the draft being later this year certainly does not help us. It makes it a little more challenging when it comes to trying to make some adjustments based on what you could potentially lose. Briar Hawkins has played a lot for us. We feel very good about Briar. Dylan Brewer has played a lot for us here in a year and a half. Feel very good about Dylan, very talented player. And then you look at our pitching staff. I mean, we returned Mac. We think we're going to get Mac England back. Mac was very valuable for us out of the bullpen early in the season. And then with some of the injuries that we had on the pitching side, moved him into a Friday night role. And at times he showed that he could be one of the most dominating starters in our league. We've already talked about Grice. We think that Grice could be a weekend starter along with a middle of the order hitter. We don't know what's going to happen draft-wise with Davis Sharp, but we feel like there's a good chance we could have him back. And a healthy Davis Sharp on the mound and at the plate is one of the best players in the country. Jeffrey Gilbert, we all know what Gilbert brings to the table out of the bullpen. He will be back. Nick Clayton, Nick Hoffman, maybe the most valuable pitcher on our pitching staff this year was Nick Hoffman, and he returns, along with a very talented group of freshmen that we need to take the next step. in Ty Olenchuk, Ricky Williams, and Alex Edmondson. So, you just look at the number of arms that we return for next year, the number of pieces that we have coming back on the offensive side, and a very talented recruiting class. Look, next year's class right now, and we all know that the draft could affect it, is ranked number 9 in the country. We have 3 top 100 players in that class. We all know, again, that come July, there's a lot of Major League Baseball teams that may want to call their name for those guys. 2022 class right now has 4 top 100 players in the country. And we continue in the recruiting to win the state. I mean, you just look at, again, just based on the publications, we've got the 5A player of the year coming into the program. The guy that finished second is committed to us in 5A baseball in the state of South Carolina. We have the 4A player of the year committed to us to come play for us in the 2022 class. We have 5 of the top 10 players in the state of South Carolina coming in next year. So when it comes to recruiting the state, we feel very, very good about where we're at as a program, and we feel good about the guys we got coming in. Are there things that we need to improve upon? Absolutely. Injuries did affect us like they affect everybody. It's certainly not an excuse, but when you look at just strictly from the pitching side this year for us, Davis Sharp started out as our Friday night starter. Davis was injured. We were unable to pitch Davis for a majority of the season. At the end of the year, we started to bring him back slowly. He pitched well out of the bullpen against USC Upstate in South Carolina, pitched well against Florida State out of the bullpen, and then had an outstanding start to end the season. But we didn't have Davis for a good portion of the season. And when you lose your Friday night starter, it can dramatically affect your team. Keyshawn Askew dealt with injuries this year. We didn't have Keyshawn until the North Carolina weekend, and Keyshawn dealt with an injury all year long. But he battled through it and pitched well for us. Mac England was hurt at different parts of the season. Matt Clark, who graduated this year, dealt with injuries throughout the season. Adam Hackenberg, our starting catcher, didn't start playing for us till about halfway through the season, along with Sam Hall, who's played a lot of baseball in his time here at Clemson. So we dealt with some injuries, and we had to make adjustments, and we did the best we could, but ultimately it wasn't good enough. We've got to do a better job in one-run games. That's an area that we've got to address and we've got to focus on. We've been good in one-run games in the past, and this year we just simply weren't good enough. And there's a lot of different factors involved in that. We've got to do a better job of situational hitting, getting runners in with less than 2 outs from third base, being able to move runners when we need to late in games. We weren't good enough at that. And that's on me as the head coach. I got to make sure that we do a better job of developing guys in the fall, because that's where it takes place, is in the fall. Got to do a better job of situational hitting and developing that mindset to get that one extra run that you need to win those close ball games. And we've also got to do a better job on the starting pitching end of just developing 3-pitch starters. I think that's a big key for us too. We had to juggle our starters quite a good bit this year due to some injuries. We got to make sure that we got a staple full of guys who know how to start. I would envision this upcoming fall, we need to be able to run those guys out there for 3+ innings and make them pitch with runners on base and figure out how to get out of tough jams. Sometimes in the fall, I think we're a little too calculated in terms of pitch counts, in terms of innings. Guys know they're only going to pitch 2 to 3 innings in the fall per start and per outing, because we also have to keep our pitching staff healthy. But we also have to understand too that the most valuable piece of technology that we have in this stadium is the scoreboard, and that we have to win the scoreboard. And that's a big piece of it. So going into the fall, we have to address the number one factor when it comes to winning games, and that is we've got to compete. We absolutely have to compete, and we have to find a way to make the fall as competitive as we possibly can. And that's something that we're going to focus on going into the fall. But there's a lot of things that we are excited about moving forward. We feel like we have the right pieces in place to be successful here. I feel very good about my coaching staff, and we're ready to move forward. So I'll now take any questions that you guys have.
The floor is open for those in attendance first. Go ahead. Monte, just wanted to ask for you, what did you learn from yourself, not only through the course of the season when you went back, but also when you talk to coaches and players that you maybe need to do better on?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that, listen, I have weekly meetings with my coaching staff. I have an end of the year meeting with all of my players, and I meet with our players periodically throughout the season. And there's a number of things that came up at the end of the year. I probably took too much of a step back this year, quite honestly. Felt like early in the season, about 15 games into the season, we were struggling. And I felt like the players probably felt a little bit too much pressure from me as the head coach when it comes to purely performance. And felt like taking a step back was the right thing to do at that time as the head coach. But ultimately, talking to some of the guys at the end of the year, I think, one of the things that stood out is they need me to push them constantly throughout the season. And that's not in a negative way. I'm not a negative oriented type coach, a critical type coach, but I think sometimes I can be fairly intense and energetic. And guys, sometimes there's certain players that feed well off of that. There's some guys that don't. And I got to make sure as a head coach that I tailor make, the way that I coach to each individual player. And that's part of my job as a head coach, just communicating with guys one-on-one more throughout the season about how they're doing, how they're responding to what we're doing as coaches. How's the locker room culture? How are things going in the locker room? And, those are some things that I took from the end of the year. I've got to make sure that I'm doing a good job of not sitting back and just evaluating what's going on and talking to the team and addressing each individual throughout the course of the year and how I can help them individually. The relationship part, I think, is a big part of what I need to do a better job of as a head coach from the beginning of the fall. It doesn't happen in the season. It's got to start in the fall. So just more one-on-one time with each player in the office, just asking them how they're doing, how can I help them more, so that we develop that bond and that relationship early on in the process, so that when we get to the spring, we're on the same page and there's that comfort level from player to coach. That's one of the things that I got to do a better job of as a leader. But we also need more leadership out of the older players in the program when it comes to the expectations of the program, how to practice the right way, how to wear the uniform the right way, how to behave in the dugout the right way, just the expectations from me to the players and the leaders in the program, and then the leaders police the dugout and the locker room. And, we just got to make sure that the leadership is the way that we need it to be for us to be successful. And, those are some of the things that we addressed at the end of the year with some of the players in my exit meetings.
When it comes to COVID, a lot of teams said that they got closer because of COVID. But then when you're struggling a little bit in the wins column, how was that locker room culture when you have maybe some players who need to step up leader-wise? Yeah. Was it tense at all? Were you able to still be a really good team family side?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think that one of the things that COVID, and we all had to deal with COVID. There's not a program in the country that did not have to deal with COVID. But the things that I saw and just able to look back and reflect on was, number one, we had no locker room in the fall. So the guys showed up here every single day. They had to wash their own uniforms and own practice gear. We could not go inside. We really couldn't have any team meetings. So everything we did was more in small groups. And again, there really wasn't the classroom setting. We used the classroom where we're sitting here right now to develop some of those team culture aspects that every team desperately needs. And our guys didn't get that in the fall. So I don't know if, going into the spring, also our freshmen did not get to come here and do summer school. Every year here coming on Sunday, we've got all our freshmen moving in. And they get to take classes together. They get to train in the weight room together. They get to eat all their meals together. And they really get a chance to build that team chemistry and bond that you need, right? And they really get acclimated to what Clemson's all about from an academic standpoint and a weight room standpoint and a campus life standpoint. They get acclimated to that fairly quickly. and they get to spend 7 weeks together or so here on campus, so that when the school year starts, the only thing that they have to get adjusted to is baseball, quite honestly. This freshman class didn't get that. They didn't get a chance to come to summer school. So they had a lot being thrown at them starting on the first day of class. And then they didn't get a chance to really get to know the guys quite as well, because they didn't get the locker room experience and the player lounge experience, and just being able to spend time together. They were all, isolated away from each other. And then you had to deal with the virus. I mean, dealing with the virus in the fall was brutal. I mean, we had, like everybody, we had a lot of guys that had to deal with that. And every time a player, got the virus, then you got direct contact issues that you have to deal with immediately. 1=4 when it came to COVID in the fall. One guy gets it. Next thing you know, you got 4 guys on your roster that are out for 14 days, bare minimum. So it was very difficult to be able to get that chemistry going, but also the consistency of being able to practice every day, being able to develop your team. It was certainly a challenge, but one that everybody had to deal with. So this year was very different because of that.
Do you feel the sense of urgency for next season? Not that you don't always have that sense of urgency, but just the way this past season went. And how do you avoid, I guess, the guys feeling that same sense of urgency in the sense that they become tense and uptight and play loose?
That's a heck of a challenge. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Look, we're all human, and we all know, what type of season we just had, right? So I think it's normal and it's natural to understand that, but it's my job as the head coach, first and foremost, to lead by example. And my message is going to be, look, this is what our program is all about, and we're moving forward. So I can't wait until we get to August the 18th. That's our first team meeting. It's going to be on August the 18th. And we're going to talk about what our program is all about and the fact that we're moving forward. We're not going to talk about this year. I think if we continue to focus on this year as a coaching staff and as players, then you're going to start to see, the level of pressure, start to creep up for sure. It's going to be on the back of your mind all the time. Look, guys don't play good baseball unless they're loose. We all know that. That hasn't changed over the course of 100 years in the game of baseball. The more loose you are, the more confident you are, the more the guys understand that it's a game and you're supposed to have fun on game day, that the work is in the practice. That's where we put in our work, and that's where we challenge our guys. But on game day, look, it should be just like you're a little kid going out to recess. You should be excited about getting to go outside and play the game of baseball. We got to get back to that. We can't worry about the outside noise. The outside noise is only going to create pressure between the lines. We've got to embrace that, and we've got to understand that, look, just go out and play and compete and make sure that you trust your training. And we've got to get back to those basics, but we also just got to move forward. And I think that's going to be the biggest message come August 18th, is that we're moving forward.
So far, how have you seen the guys reset and have that, embrace what happened in classes and get ready for this next one?
Yeah, I think our guys right now are focused on what they need to be focusing on, which is we've got a number of guys out playing in summer ball, and the guys are doing well. They're working on the things that they need to work on individually. Right now, it's all about them individually. It's not about the team. And that was my message to all the guys going out this summer. Focus on yourself. Focus on what you need to do to get better as a player and as an individual. So our guys are doing that. We've got a bunch of guys out playing. We have some that are getting ready for the draft, that are here training and working out and trying to put themselves in the best position physically to be prepared for the draft. So, right now it's about that. It's about them individually working on what they need to do to develop as players. For the guys that are coming back, and then those guys that are trying to prepare for the draft. It's about getting ready for that and just seeing what happens with the draft. And then obviously they'll address, once the draft happens, if they don't get drafted, what their next steps are after that.
Coach, you just talked about how well you're recruiting in the state. How much getting back into the common market
make an impact on, helping recruit the top state guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the academic common market, just so everybody kind of understands the academic common market, for us, we only have a handful of states that it really works for. Okay. And we have a number of guys committed into 2022 class already. So once we got it back, our biggest focus right now is trying to target maybe a handful of guys that the academic common market would apply to for the 22 class, but more importantly, the 23 class. So, because that's our big focus right now is the 23 class, is we're out evaluating guys in that class quite a good bit. And the academic common market certainly will come into play with kids that are from those states where it can apply, because it certainly helps when you can offer opportunities to young men to where you can reduce their cost of school. Because ultimately, with 11.7 scholarships, oftentimes it comes down to cost, for families, because out-of-state costs, at Clemson, even in-state costs at Clemson, the cost of school, is grown exponentially in the last decade. So anything that we can do to try to cut that cost down, so that when a family is looking at Clemson as an option and they're comparing it to the Georgias and the Georgia Techs and, the Tennessees and the Alabamas and South Carolina and all the schools that we're recruiting against, we have to be able to stretch our dollars to the best of our ability so that we can compete for kids in states where the academic common market applies. So yeah, it's a huge factor for us.
All right, for those on Zoom, go ahead with your questions.
Monte, this is Matt. What were your conversations with Dan like, as far as what you could do or what you need from him to I guess get better as a program, and then what kind of feedback did you get from him as far as what he wants to see from the program?
Well, Dan and I had our meeting, and it was very, very good. It was very good. It was and it was more of a conversation between he and I, and Dan and I just, the message that I got from it was that he's here to help us and to help me as the head coach. And we discussed, several things in that meeting that I felt like we needed to do a better job of. And his biggest message to me was that he was there to support me and whatever I felt like we needed to do to get better. So those were the things that we talked about. The conversation and the details of the conversation, quite honestly, are between he and I. But I will tell you that it was overwhelmingly positive and supportive on Dan's end. So we had a great conversation.
Any other questions?
How closely are you following? I mean, I know you're doing it pretty closely, but just how close are you following the draft and keeping up with some of the top guys that you have? And then how much have you talked with Bubba and Will Taylor about their decision, if at all?
I have. So I've actually met with Bubba and his family. I've met with Will and his family, and I'm going to meet with one of them today. So yes, I am actively communicating with both of those guys and their families and meeting with them face to face. Over the course of this week.
And if you can't share, I don't know how much detail you can get into, but just what's your message for them as far as trying to make this decision and how to weigh what's the right move for them?
Well, again, what's the right move for them is going to be a family decision. What we try to do is we try to share with them the benefits of the Clemson experience. I mean, I don't know if you can have a better experience than going to school at a school like Clemson, playing in the best football program in the country, and with Clemson football, and getting a chance to do both is a very unique situation where you can play football and baseball at Clemson. I don't know if there is a price tag on that type of experience. So that's our biggest message to them. And listen, those guys have a very, tough decision to make when you are garnering first round type opportunities in the baseball draft, trying to make a decision as to what's best for your future. But the biggest thing that we're doing is just trying to show them just how great the experience is here at Clemson and what benefits it can provide for them.
Monte, how different is it though this year with the draft, being that a lot of these guys aren't going to go to play at a minor league team this year? They're going to have to wait till next spring training. Does that help when you got a guy like Bubba and Will that are trying to make this decision to help you guys?
Well, that's a great question, Will. And I don't think that's been discussed enough overall, is the fact that the way minor league baseball is structured right now, the guys that are drafted, they may not play. And then they're going to go to instructs in the fall, okay? They're not going to play baseball till next spring, right? And then when they play baseball next spring, oftentimes they're either going to be at the complex or they're going to be in low A somewhere trying to play. It is a challenging situation right now for players going into the draft and coming out of the draft to go play professional baseball. There's simply not as many spots in the minor leagues right now because they've reduced all the rookie ball teams outside of the teams that are at the complex for each affiliate. There's less opportunities for those guys to go play, college guys and high school guys. So yeah, I mean, you just start thinking about competitively, when will you play competitive baseball if you sign a professional contract this year? It could be a while before those guys go out and play. And, quite frankly, you come to Clemson, you're going to be able to compete, during that time period. So we feel like it's a great situation for guys to come to school and to return to school. But ultimately, as you know, you start throwing dollars and cents in there and the opportunity to sign, they have to weigh a lot of different situations, when it comes to that.